Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of my amendment to H.R. 2406, or the SHARE Act, and urge my colleagues to support its adoption. This amendment is very straightforward. It simply requires the Forest Service to publish a notice in the Federal Register along with a justification explaining the decision for the closure of any public road on Forest Service lands. Now, some of you may ask why this amendment is necessary, and that it is understandable because, fortunately, many Americans have never had to deal with this issue. However, in my district, in the Pacific Northwest, and in many federal forests across the country, many people have faced the reality that a public road that they have used for decades is suddenly closed. When I say closed, if I could refer your attention to this photograph, there's a picture indicating that a road is no longer even available for use. It's not just a chain going across the road. However, the reality is far worse. When the Forest Service closes many of these public roads, they do so by piling gravel, downing trees, or both in order to block access. At other times, they create what are called tank traps, essentially large ditches dug into the ground that make passage impossible. Furthermore, these practices create impediments that not only block human access, but can also restrict the movement of wildlife in our national forests. This has become a serious issue in central Washington, and for many people who use these roads, it can have detrimental impacts on their everyday lives, whether by making their daily travel much longer or by restricting access to campsites or treasured areas in our national forests. Some of these roads have been in use for 70 or 80 years, with generations of Washingtonians using them for access to forests for recreation. Yet in most cases, the Forest Services have closed them without even first notifying local residents and the surrounding communities. Mr. Speaker, I believe the first indication of a public road being closed should not come when an individual or a family is faced with an impassable roadway, but rather through adequate public notice from the Forest Service. And that is why I have introduced this amendment today. Just to be clear, my amendment simply requires the Forest Service to provide notification when closing a public road on Forest Service land, as well as justification for such decision. This is an important first step in ensuring that rural communities and residents are given proper warning and advance notice when a public roadway will suddenly be blocked and access to federal forest area will no longer be available. Local residents and communities deserve to know when such an action is taking place, whether forest access will be denied. This amendment will guarantee the Forest Service is being transparent in future decisions and closures. At this point, I'd like to yield to the good chairman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Newhouse. I'd like to urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment, and I yield back.
Thank you, sir. And rural communities deserve better from their government. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.